On November 2nd of 1999, a mild-mannered but paranoid technician committed the worst massacre in Hawaii's history. To this day, there are still a lot of questions left to be answered. This is the case of Byron Uesugi. Hello, friend, and welcome to High Time Crime. My name's Joel, and on here I specialize in true crime and also being in the void. But anyway, today we're going over a psychotic breakdown years in the making. One where a seemingly normal man progressively became more and more paranoid and delusional until one day he just snapped. For today's story, we're heading to the wonderful state of Hawaii, specifically to a little place known as Honolulu. Honolulu is the capital city of Hawaii. It's home to around 343,000 people, and with its beautiful natural scenery and sandy beaches, it's a wonderful place to visit. But while Honolulu is mostly known for being a very peaceful, relaxing tourist destination, every now and again, there's a bit of chaos. In August of 1991, a Hawaiian citizen by the name of Orlando Ganal Sr. learned that his wife Mabel was cheating on him with another man. Shortly after figuring out the news, Orlando bought a gun, broke into his wife's parents' house, and murdered them in a jealous rage. Afterwards, he went to his wife's lover's home, burned the house down, and left. 4 people died, including 2 children. But in a strange twist of fate, Orlando's wife and her lover were not among those who were killed. Regardless, at this time, this was the largest killing in Hawaii's history. That was until Byron Uesugi came along. To this day, much of Byron's early life is a mystery. We do know that he was born in 1959 and grew up in a part of Honolulu called Nuuanu. I'm sorry if I butchered that. His parents' names were Hiro and Bonnie. Hiro was a mailman, while Bonnie's profession is unclear. As a teenager, Byron attended a high school known as Roosevelt High. Here, Byron was a quiet, well-behaved student who never really got into any trouble. He was part of both the Army's ROTC program and the school's rifle team. In 1977, Byron graduated from school and shortly thereafter had what his brother described as a life-changing experience. One that he never really recovered from. In the spring of 1977, Byron had just finished attending a high school graduation party. At the time, it was dark outside, and Byron stumbled his way into his father's car to drive back home. After getting into the car and driving off, he soon began speeding on the roadway. At first, everything was fine. The music was blasting. Byron could feel the air streaming past him. He was having the time of his life. But following a momentary lapse of judgment, he drifted across the lane and the car slammed into a telephone pole at a rapid speed. Immediately, Byron's entire body shifted forward and he hit his head on the windshield. Luckily for him, the airbags deployed, but the car was totaled and Byron suffered a series of injuries. After arriving at the scene, Byron's brother and father took him to the emergency room. Here he was forced to undergo relatively mild treatment by a plastic surgeon. Now overall, Byron was banged up pretty good. He had hurt his knee and his hip, and his body was covered with bruises. But more importantly than all of that, he had suffered some form of head injury. In fact, the following day when Byron was released from the emergency hospital, him and his brother went to check out the car at the service station, and according to Dennis, some of Byron's hair was still embedded in the cracked windshield. From this point forward, Byron was never really the same, but exactly how messed up he wasn't going to be obvious for years to come. Fast forward to 1984, Byron got a job at Xerox, where he worked as a technician helping to fix Xerox machines, which for those that don't know is just the original generic name for a photocopy machine. Byron was very technically proficient and knowledgeable. Every day he walked into the office, he wore the same style outfit, and followed the same general routine. Meanwhile, at home, he lived in a house with his older brother Dennis and his father Hyro. The street they lived on was called Easy Street, and by all appearances, it was true to its name. Here, Byron led a simple life of building furniture, fixing cars, and breeding rare fish. The last hobby of which was even a nice source of income for him. Sometimes Byron sold the fish he bred to local pet stores for as much as $700 a fish. But in addition to the other stuff, he also had a more alarming hobby, at least for someone who was secretly mentally unstable, and that was his firearm collection. Byron's firearm collection was pretty extensive. He had as many as 25 guns in total, including 9 revolvers, 9 pistols, 5 rifles, and 2 shotguns. In the year 1985, Byron was charged with driving under the influence and given 72 hours of community service. He also had to pay a $200 fine and had his license suspended. Other than this, Byron had received no criminal charges his entire life, and for a period of time, he fit in well enough in society that nobody noticed a thing. Most people Byron interacted with, including his neighbors, just viewed him as a quiet, simple man, the type of guy who sort of just kept to himself. But then something terrible happened in Byron's personal life, something that began the slow but complete unraveling of his mental health. In the year 1988, Byron's mother Bonnie died. It's unclear how or why, but shortly after this, Byron started complaining to a neighbor about a poking sensation in his brain. Then in 1993, he got transferred to a different work group. Before this, Byron had evidently been with the same work group for a long time. And for whatever reason, he just wasn't able to handle this change. Shortly thereafter, Byron's mental issues began really ramping up. Soon he was randomly accusing his coworkers of harassment and product tampering. In response, the individuals on his new team ostracized him from the group. This led to Byron experiencing powerful feelings of isolation and resentment. And one day, Byron got so irritated by this that he flipped out at work and kicked a massive dent in an elevator door. At the same time, he also made violent threats to his supervisor and another coworker. After this incident, Byron was arrested and forced to undergo mandatory psychiatric evaluation along with anger management courses, the first part of which took place at a psychiatric ward in Castle Hospital, where Byron spent a total of 5 days. At the hospital, the psychiatrist who examined Byron found him to have a disorder that caused him to experience grand delusions and paranoia. Byron evidently believed that he was the subject of some strange conspiracy at work between him and his coworkers. He told the shrink that he felt like his house was bugged with listening devices in the walls and in his bathroom drain, that the people he worked with were engaged in patterns of harassment, backstabbing, and spreading salacious rumors, and that his coworkers were sabotaging his copiers, posing as FBI agents, and had invaded his home and mutilated his fish. Byron even went as far as to say that he thought that if he ever had a child, that the government would confiscate it. But on top of all of this, Byron explicitly admitted to experiencing both auditory and visual hallucinations. He said that frequently he heard voices in his head and saw shadows in the corners of his eyes. Now, despite everything we've just noted, the psychiatrist claimed that he didn't find Byron to be especially dangerous, nor was Byron put on any form of medication. Instead, after the 5 days were up, he was sent straight home, and that was that. For whatever reason, it seems like a lot of the people that interacted with Byron, including the psychiatrist, had an easy time looking past all of the crazy stuff. Maybe the reason why is because when Byron wasn't talking crazy, he genuinely seemed like a normal guy. Or maybe it's because they were afraid of him. Whatever it was, Byron eventually managed to keep his job, and the criminal charges against him were dropped. The following year, he then attempted to buy another gun to add to his collection, but was denied by the state. Realistically, it was only a matter of time before Byron continued his alarming behavior, except in the future, the danger would become more real than anyone could have ever imagined. In 1995, Byron began explicitly making threats of committing a shooting at work were he ever to be fired. According to one coworker, Byron told him, "I'll take care of them. I'll shoot all of them." Then in 1997, a strange thing happened. One day, Byron received a visit at his home from a priest. Evidently, a few years before this, Byron told his brother Dennis he felt like a shadow had pinned him down in their home. Byron said to Dennis that the shadow leapt into his bed at night and held him down so he couldn't move, and the only way he was able to get it off of his body was by mentally willing it away. In the years after this, Byron spoke with his father about the same issue, and his father told him to see a psychiatrist. In response, Byron said, "I'm not crazy, leave me alone." Then he began pounding his head with his fists and repeatedly saying, "Make it stop, make it stop." Additionally, on multiple occasions, Brian continued complaining about the poking sensation in his brain. His reaction to these episodes generally consisted of grimacing, finding a sharp object like a knife or a screwdriver, and then stabbing the walls or nearby objects over and over again. According to Hyro, Byron always referred to the sensation or whatever was quote-unquote poking him as a he. So anyway, now in 1997, Dennis and Byron's father had finally brought in a Buddhist priest to help cleanse their home. The priest told Dennis to dig a bunch of holes in the corners of the property and place offerings such as beer, rice, and fish in them. Then, once Dennis was finished, he proceeded on with the rites. According to the priest, Byron was very skeptical of the whole process. Throughout the course of his visit, Byron just stood there in a posture that suggested the whole thing was a waste of time. And interestingly enough, even the priest felt like Byron was a bit off mentally. But after the cleansing was finished, Byron no longer had much of a supernatural excuse for why he was seeing strange things. Meanwhile, at Byron's work, things could have used a cleansing there as well. Instead, Byron's behavior was just gradually getting worse and worse. According to coworkers, he started leaving them threatening notes on their desks. The notes included a hand-drawn image of a Xerox worker shooting his fellow employees, with of course the shooter being a representation of himself and the coworkers being the apparent victims. It's unclear whether Byron's coworkers attempted to speak to management about this. But from the years 1994 to late 1999, no other major incidents were reported. But then, something changed. Shortly before November of 1999, word got around to Byron that his coworkers were planning some sort of group meeting about him, intervention style. As for what this was about, well, according to Xerox management, it was supposed to be about Brian's lagging pace of work. They weren't going to fire him, nor was he going to be disciplined in any manner. But he was going to have a talking to. And in truth, Byron had been slacking as of lately. Now, the logical explanation for this was simply that Xerox was beginning to use a different machine Byron wasn't comfortable with yet. Evidently, Byron's management was planning to put him through a training course for that machine, though. That way he could learn more about it. But Byron rejected this idea with a fervor, as he often did with any major changes in his life. Still, the course was set for November 2nd of 1999, and it was going to take place whether he liked it or not. In the meantime, Byron's failure to adapt soon led him to experiencing a lot of frustration. When he ultimately heard about the group meeting, also on November 2nd, he was fully convinced, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that management was going to fire him. As a result, Byron's previous suspicions about an odd conspiracy against him seemed to be coming true, at least in his deranged mind. And so with this being the case, Byron was finally about ready to snap. On November 1st of 1999, a day before Doomsday, Brian's older brother Dennis recalls coming home to see Byron acting pretty normal. Apparently, as late as 8 p.m., Byron and his brother were both sitting in front of the TV, eating dinner. Dennis is quoted as saying, "He was eating juke and beef lau lau, acting normally. He was still up when I went to bed and still in his room when I got up and left for work a little before 6, meaning 6 of the following morning." After Dennis headed off to work the following morning, Byron got ready for work himself. Along with his usual work tools, he brought with him a 9mm Glock 17. Sometime after this, Byron reportedly said, "I decided to give them a reason to fire me." The following is an official 911 phone call made the morning of the shooting. It took place at 8:08 a.m., November 2nd of 1999.
This is the ambulance. How can I help you? Hey, can I get an ambulance? And please, to 1200 North Nimitz Highway, Xerox Corp. What's wrong? Somebody's got a gun. Has been shooting people up in the building. Okay, inside the building? Yeah, inside the building. Okay, and you need the cops for it now. Okay, you're calling from Hart Street? Yeah, I'm calling from an office on the side someplace. Okay, 1200 North Nimitz. Right. Okay. Okay, hang on now. Okay. Yeah. Holy. Sir, what's going on? It's one of the guys came into our Xerox building with a gun. What's the address? To shoot people. What is the address? 1200 North Nimitz Highway, Xerox Corp. You gotta get there right away. Okay, anybody hurt? Yeah. Some of the guys said some guys are down. They're dead. Okay, that's the Nimitz Business Center? Is that no, next door, 1200 North Nimitz, Xerox Corp. I ran over to another building. Okay, where is this guy right now? I don't know. He's in the building as far as I know. He might have left, I'm not sure. Ambulance, go ahead, we got you. Okay. Okay, tell me what's going on over there, sir. There's been shooting here. Okay, we have HPD, don't hang up, okay? Okay. Everybody coming. Stay with me now, okay? Great. Okay, so tell me what's going on. Well, there's one shooting here. Somebody, I guess. Huh? How many patients do you have? People? How many people do you have? I can see at least 2 or 3. 2 or 3? Maybe more. Okay, send some more ambulances. Okay, sir, are you out of danger right now? Yes. Okay. I think the person just left. He left the scene? Yeah. Okay, well, stay with me on the phone. We've got everybody coming, police, every ambulance, and the fire truck. Great. This is the Xerox building. Right on the corner. Okay, Lance, now tell me, how many patients can you see right now? I'm in a room, my office right now. Okay. But I see 2 people on the next room. Okay, are they moving or breathing? No. Is it safe for you to go near them? Are you sure that the shooter is gone? Yeah. Okay. There's at least 6 people. 6 people. Okay, we need another ambulance then. I think it looks like they're dead. The shooter's gone. He says the shooter's gone. Is there anybody that you know, Lance, was a shooter? Yeah, looks like one of our employees. One of your employees? Yeah. Okay. And he has left the scene? Yeah. Do you happen to know what kind of weapon it was? Did you see it? No, I don't. Okay. I didn't see the thing. Okay. All I know, I heard the shot. I saw one person lie on the floor. Okay. And I ran downstairs to get the other people out.
Byron Uesugi woke up around 7:30 to 7:45 a.m. on November 2nd of 1999. Upon getting out of bed, he put on a dark blue Aloha t-shirt, long dark pants, and black shoes. Then, creeping through the hallway past his father's bedroom, where his father was sound asleep, Byron went to his gun inventory and picked out a 9mm Glock 17. After grabbing the gun, he quietly exited the home, got into his green Xerox company work van, and left. At the end of the dead-end street he lived on, Byron turned right onto Limey Street. While driving through the street, he passed the historic Nuuanu Onsen Tea House. 10 minutes later, Byron arrived at work at the Xerox building on Nimitz Highway. He then pulled into the parking lot, got out of the vehicle, and entered the building. The time was now shortly after 8 a.m. After passing through the front doors, he saw a guy named Lance Hamura. Byron talked to Lance for a little bit, but it's unclear what they talked about. Lance said that Byron appeared normal and calm. Byron then casually began walking up the stairs to the second floor. After which, he walked past a field supervisor named Ronald Yamanaka who was having a coffee in the break room. Obviously, Ronald didn't notice that Byron had a gun, and it's unclear as to why Byron didn't do anything to Ronald. Maybe, just like Lance, they were not targets of Byron. And perhaps Byron had an exact plan in his mind because of what happens next. Byron then walked down the hall to the end where a computer room was. 3 men, one named Ronald Koamai, one named Jason Balatico, and the other named Randall Shin were inside. Byron pulled his gun out and aimed it directly at Ron's head and pulled the trigger. Jason saw this happen and immediately tried running at Byron to stop him, but Byron then shot 5 shots at him, hitting him each time. Peter died almost instantly. Randall, who was sitting directly next to Ron, saw all of this happen and immediately went into a state of shock to the point where he literally couldn't move. Byron completely ignored the fact that he was there and then walked down the hallway to where the conference room was. A meeting was going on. This is where his supervisor, Melvin Lee, and 4 other coworkers, Ronald Kataoka, Peter Mark, John Sakamoto, and Ford Kanehira, were. Ronald, the field supervisor that Byron saw in the break room, heard the gunshots and actually saw Byron shoot at Jason. He then ran into the computer room after Byron left and grabbed Randall, and they got out of there. Byron, however, then started firing at everyone in the conference room. According to witnesses, he was seen smiling and waving goodbye to each victim as he did this. Also, when Byron shot John, he didn't kill him instantly. John was facing downwards, and so Byron grabbed him and made him face upwards. Byron then shot him again, making sure that John saw. After that, he had to reload his Glock 17 with the hollow point bullets he brought with him. Ford was the last person Byron killed. In total, Byron fired over 20 shots, and once he was finished, he went back across the building towards the stairs. Before heading back down the stairs, he saw someone trying to flee from him down the steps, and he shot at them, but missed. Following this failed attempt, Byron then went down the stairs, left the building, and escaped in a green Xerox company work van. For the next several hours, the people of Honolulu would be holding their breath, not knowing what would happen next. Now, at the same time his son was committing a shooting, Byron's father, Hiro, was at the grocery store shopping. When Hiro woke up that morning, he never could have guessed what would happen. In the years leading up to his son's mental breakdown, Hiro knew Byron had issues, as we talked about earlier, but the idea that Byron could kill a bunch of people was out of the question. So on November 2nd, when Hiro arrived back at home after grocery shopping and was told that his son had committed an atrocity, he was almost in a state of shock. Millions of questions popped into Hiro's head all at once. One on hand, he was puzzled by how this could have happened, but on another, he felt a sense of extreme anger. Upon talking to the local news, Hiro was quoted as saying, "I'm going to bring him another gun so he can shoot himself." Additionally, he talked about how his son had never hinted at what he was going to do, at least when he last spoke to him during that morning. But Hiro did make an assumption about Byron's motives, saying, "He must have got fired. I don't know." Meanwhile, Hiro's other son, Dennis, was at work when he learned what had happened. One of Dennis's coworkers told him about the shooting at Xerox, and immediately Dennis worried for his brother's safety. Minutes later, a different coworker then asked him if he was related to a guy named Brian Uesugi, considering the fact that they shared the same last name. To which Dennis replied, "No, but I have a brother named Byron." Seconds after saying that, Dennis realized what had happened. Right away, he left and made his way to the police to help them in whatever capacity he could. But what exactly had Byron himself been doing in the hours leading up to this? Well, after fleeing from the Xerox building in his green work van, he had since made his way to downtown Honolulu. Nearly 2 hours after the massacre, Byron was seen by a woman who had been jogging on the sidewalk. According to the jogger, Byron was sitting outside in a van near the Hawaii Nature Center by this point. But little did she or anyone else realize that Byron wasn't just sitting outside doing nothing. From this distance, he was keeping 35 elementary school students trapped in the building nearby without food or water. As it turned out, inside the Hawaii Nature Center was a class of students on a field trip. When it was learned that Byron was outside, this meant that they were unable to leave the building and quite possibly in extreme danger. Shortly after the jogger reported Byron's location, police arrived near the scene but kept their distance. Then at 12 p.m., hostage negotiators arrived. As part of police protocol, they cordoned off the entire nearby area in an effort to trap Byron where he was. Meanwhile, for the next several hours, Byron was acting extraordinarily calm for someone in his position. The communication between Byron and police was primarily done through cell phone. Throughout the course of the standoff with police, he read magazines, smoked cigarettes, and drank coffee. And periodically, he made sure his pistol was exposed for all to see. It's clear that Byron had felt a certain degree of satisfaction about what he had done. But on the other side of the standoff where the police were, things moved in slow motion. Over 50 local and federal police officers were now within several feet of Byron's vehicle. They had him surrounded. At this moment, anything could have happened, but gradually the threat became less and less. Around 2 p.m., all the elementary school children had successfully left the Nature Center building and been escorted to safety. Additionally, all of Byron's family had been notified about the situation. But it wasn't until Byron heard his brother Dennis's voice coming through the phone that he finally decided to do the right thing. Evidently, Dennis had recorded an audio message for police to use during the standoff. The audio said something to the extent of, "We want you to give yourself up, Byron. We don't want you or anyone else to get hurt. We want you to listen to the negotiators. You have your fish and wood projects waiting for you at home." Shortly after that audio was played, Byron left the vehicle with his hands up and allowed the police to take him into their custody. In total, the standoff lasted 5 hours and ended at 12:50 p.m. But the penalty for what Byron had done was going to last a lifetime. Byron's official trial for murder commenced on May 15th of 2000. The arguments each side made were pretty much what you would expect. Byron's defense argued that he was effectively insane, while the prosecution argued that despite his mental illness, he knew full well what he was doing. In the end, Byron was given a life sentence in prison without the possibility of parole. After the sentencing, an image was put on the front of a newspaper featuring Byron's father, Jairo's reaction to the outcome. His face is one of a father who has lost a son. But in truth, Jairo's sadness doesn't compare to what the families of the victims had to go through. They were permanently and suddenly stripped of their loved ones forever. There are no words to express what that's like. Jason Balutico was 33 years old and from Honolulu. He was described as a very handsome, popular man with a lot of friends. John Sakamoto was 36 and from Honolulu. John had a wife named Susan and 2 children. He was described as a loving, family-oriented man and a good neighbor. He loved fishing, and it was a great passion of his. Ford Kanierha was 41 from Kaneohe, and he was married with a 5-year-old son. Ford's personality was happy, go-lucky, innocent, and cheerful. Ronald Kataoka was 50 years old and from Mililani. He worked at Xerox for over 10 years, and he was described as a nice guy with a positive attitude. Ronald played basketball with his 11-year-old daughter in their driveway. Ronald Koomai was 54 years old and from Makiki. Ronald worked at Xerox for a grand total of 3 decades. He was survived by his son and grandson, but had just recently lost his father to a stroke shortly before he passed away himself. He liked playing golf. Peter Mark was 46 years old and from Honolulu. Peter had a wife and 2 children and was a hard-working man. And Melvin Lee, who was 58 years old, from Waipahu. As I mentioned earlier, Melvin was Byron's boss, and not only that, but a 30-year-long employee at Xerox. He was also a married man with a big heart and a nice guy who was non-confrontational. And lastly, it's worth mentioning that in the years since this tragedy, Xerox has implemented various workplace initiatives in order to ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. But anyways, thank you for watching this episode of High Time Crime. If true crime is your thing, then please like and subscribe because it's all we do. I also have an all-exclusive Patreon if you're interested in that. There's a bunch of tiers to choose from, and the third one allows for you to see a Patreon-only video, and that tier and the second one allow you to have your name at the end of each High Time Crime video. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care, friend.